Welcome back. Today we descend into the dark depths of the Barents Sea to relive one of the most haunting maritime tragedies of the modern age. This is the story of the curse of the Kursk, the submarine that never surfaced. August 12, 2000. The Russian Northern Fleet was conducting large-scale naval exercises, the first in a decade. Among the ships and submarines gathered in the Arctic waters was their pride, the nuclear-powered submarine K-141 Kursk, one of the most advanced and heavily armed vessels in the world. 155 meters long, armed with 24 cruise missiles and 2 nuclear reactors, it was thought to be unsinkable, a fortress beneath the sea. At 11:29 a.m., the Kursk prepared to fire a practice torpedo. Then, without warning, the sea shook with an explosion. Seismic sensors in Norway and Alaska detected the blast, the equivalent of a small earthquake. 2 minutes later, a second, far more powerful detonation followed. The fleet's radar lost contact. The Kursk had vanished. At first, the Russian Navy assumed it was a communications failure. They waited. But hours passed, no message, no signal, no surfacing. Only silence. When rescue ships finally reached the area, they found a patch of debris and an oil slick on the water. Beneath it, at a depth of 108 meters, lay the shattered hull of the Kursk. Inside were 118 men, sailors, officers, engineers, trapped in darkness. The front section had been obliterated by the blast. But in the rear compartments, at least 23 survivors had made it, sealing themselves off from the flooding, writing notes by flashlight, waiting for help. One of them, Captain Lieutenant Dmitry Kolesnikov, scrawled a message on a scrap of paper. All personnel from sections 6, 7, and 8 moved to the 9th compartment. We are waiting. There is little oxygen left. The world soon learned the Kursk was lost, but no one knew if anyone was still alive. Russia launched a rescue operation, but their equipment was outdated, slow, and unprepared for the Arctic's icy waters. For days, divers tried to attach docking collars to the submarine's escape hatch, but the sea was too rough, the tools too weak. Norway and the UK offered help immediately, but political pride delayed Moscow's acceptance. By the time international rescue teams arrived, it was too late. All 118 men were gone. When divers finally opened the rear hatch, they found the 9th compartment filled with ash, soot, and bodies still in their positions. The air had turned toxic from fire and carbon monoxide. They had survived for hours, maybe even a full day, waiting for a rescue that never came. The investigation revealed the first explosion came from a leaking Type 65 torpedo. Its fuel ignited, triggering a chain reaction that destroyed the forward section and detonated other warheads. But many still questioned the truth. Some claimed the Kursk collided with a NATO submarine. Others whispered about secret weapons, government cover-ups, and orders to hide the real cause. The truth, like the sub itself, remained buried in the deep. In 2001, after months of preparation, Russia raised the wreck of the Kursk from the seafloor in one of the most complex salvage operations in history. But one thing was left behind: the torpedo section, too unstable and dangerous to lift. It remains there, under tons of Arctic water, a tomb of twisted metal and secrets. The Kursk was supposed to symbolize the rebirth of Russia's navy. Instead, it became its ghost. A reminder of human pride, political silence, and the price of delay. The families of the crew still visit the memorial in Murmansk, where the names of 118 men are carved into stone. Every year, on August 12, bells toll 12 times, one for each compartment of the Kursk. The submarine that was said to be unsinkable now lies silent beneath the sea, her reactors cold, her flag still inside, her crew still remembered. The Barents Sea has claimed her, and with her, the last illusion that technology can conquer nature or truth. The Kursk never resurfaced. And perhaps it never will. Even years after the tragedy, the name Kursk still echoes through the halls of naval academies and the nightmares of those who watched helplessly from the surface. For the Russian Navy, it was more than the loss of a submarine, it was the loss of pride, the collapse of an illusion that strength alone could defy the sea. For the families, it was a wound that never healed. Mothers, wives, and children gathered on the docks of Murmansk, clutching photographs as days turned into weeks, begging for news that would never come. They watched military spokesmen repeat the same empty words, "The situation is under control." But it never was. The truth was buried beneath layers of steel, water, and politics. When President Vladimir Putin finally visited the grieving families, emotions exploded. One mother screamed, "Where were you when our sons were dying?" Guards rushed to sedate her on camera. It became a moment that defined the disaster not only as a maritime tragedy, but as a national humiliation. The Kursk had sunk not just beneath the sea, but beneath the weight of denial. When the wreck was raised in 2001, engineers and divers described the haunting scene. The submarine's bow was completely gone, as if torn away by a giant's hand. The inner walls were folded and burnt, pipes melted into the shape of ribs, and the airlock doors sealed by heat and pressure. In the 9th compartment, they found Kolesnikov's note sealed in a plastic bag, his handwriting steady until the end. "There is no one from the 6th section," it read. "We are writing in the hope that at least someone will read this later." That message became the voice of 118 men, a whisper through steel, heard around the world. After the investigation, the Russian Navy quietly retired the faulty torpedoes that caused the explosion, but it never fully admitted responsibility. Official statements called it an accident. Others called it negligence. To this day, the full truth remains disputed. Some believe the Kursk collided with an American submarine shadowing the exercise. Others say it was a design flaw, a torpedo built with unstable fuel, rushed into service. The official cause remains the torpedo detonation, but the silence around it still feels deliberate. For the survivors' families, that silence was unbearable. They demanded answers, held vigils, and refused to let the memory fade. In Murmansk, a memorial now stands, a giant bronze sail, shaped like the fin of a submarine rising from the earth. Beneath it are the names of all 118 sailors, and the inscription, "To those who are still on watch." Divers who have visited the wreck say it feels different from any other. There's no hostility, no fear, only stillness. The Kursk rests upright on the seafloor, her hull split open, her flag still visible through layers of silt. She's not just a relic of war, but a tomb of truth, a reminder that technology and power mean nothing when arrogance meets the ocean. Every August, when the Barents Sea grows calm and gray, sailors in the Northern Fleet gather and ring a bell 12 times, one for each compartment, one for each layer of silence. Then they lower wreaths into the water, and the sea closes over them, as it did that day. The Kursk remains below, undisturbed, a monument to courage, to mistakes, and to the men who waited in the dark for a rescue that never came. The world moved on, but the ocean did not. It remembers everything. As the years passed, the Kursk became more than a submarine, it became a symbol of everything hidden beneath the surface, both in the sea and in power. For many Russians, it represented not just loss, but betrayal. The sailors aboard had trusted their commanders, their country, their machines, and all had failed them. The ocean took their lives, but bureaucracy buried the truth. Even today, more than 2 decades later, the mention of the Kursk brings a silence to any room in Russia's naval towns. Veterans bow their heads, and younger officers glance away, as if speaking her name might summon her ghost from the depths. In the archives, the rescue logs tell a story too painful to read. Rescue subs like Pre-ISIS 34 tried again and again to dock with the Kursk's hatch, but each attempt failed by millimeters. Batteries died, oxygen ran low, and time ran out. Norwegian divers who later reached the wreck confirmed what everyone feared, that men had survived for many hours. They had written, prayed, and waited in the dark, listening to the creak of metal and the distant roar of the Arctic Sea above. The last thing they heard before the fire took the oxygen was silence. When Russia finally raised the Kursk in October 2001, the operation was an engineering miracle but an emotional catastrophe. Families watched the live feed as the massive steel coffin broke the surface after more than a year beneath. Its hull, torn and blackened, was still dripping Arctic water. Inside were the remains of their sons and husbands. Many of them, found in the rear compartments, were still at their posts. They had never abandoned duty. The submarine was brought to a dock in Roslyakovo, near Murmansk. 4 months, investigators and engineers worked to cut through the twisted steel, documenting every centimeter. Each discovery revealed another failure: faulty torpedoes, weak safety systems, and poor emergency planning. In the end, the conclusion was simple and damning: the Kursk had sunk not because of the sea, but because of neglect. In 2002, the crew was posthumously awarded the title Hero of the Russian Federation. It was a gesture of honor, but also of guilt, a nation trying to repay what could never be restored. Today, the site of the sinking remains off-limits to civilian ships. Fishermen call it the silent zone. They say their sonar pings behave strangely. They're echoes that bounce back from something too solid, too cold. The sea still guards her secret. At the Kursk Memorial in Murmansk, each name carved in stone has a photograph beside it, smiling faces frozen in time. Below, a plaque reads, "They performed their duty to the end." Every August 12th, families gather with candles and flowers, the Arctic wind howling through the harbor, carrying the sound of the sea, the same sea that once swallowed their sons. The Kursk was meant to show strength, but it revealed fragility. It was built to endure pressure, but it cracked under the weight of human failure. She rests now on the ocean floor, a monument to courage and silence. And when the cold currents sweep through the Barents Sea, sailors say you can still hear faint metallic echoes, like a heartbeat deep below, reminding the world that the ocean forgets nothing. The sea keeps its dead. But it also keeps their stories. Even now, when Russian submariners set out to sea, the name Kursk is spoken quietly, not as a warning, but as a promise. They touched the steel of their own vessels before diving, murmuring, "For the Kursk," as if asking for protection from the spirits of those who never returned. The Barents Sea has become sacred ground, an invisible cemetery beneath the waves. Above it, the surface looks calm and endless, but every sailor who passes knows what lies below: 18,000 tons of steel, shattered by fire, pressure, and time. Marine scientists who have surveyed the wreck say the ocean is slowly reclaiming it. Coral and seaweed grow along the torn hull, fish weave through the open compartments. The once proud submarine is now part of the ecosystem, life growing from death. And yet, the shape of her remains unmistakable. Her tower, her insignia, the faint outlines of the word etched into the rust, still visible, still defiant. For the Russian people, the Kursk became a mirror, reflecting both the bravery of its sailors and the failures of those who sent them into danger. The government promised transparency, but much of the truth was buried beneath classified reports and sealed testimonies. Official documentaries spoke of heroism, independent ones spoke of negligence. Somewhere between them lies the real story, a submarine that was doomed not by war, but by pride and silence. In the years that followed, Russia rebuilt its fleet. New submarines were launched, new technology installed, new officers trained to prevent another disaster. But even with modern systems and advanced safety protocols, one rule remains: never forget the Kursk. At the Naval Academy in St. Petersburg, cadets still study her final mission. They read Kolesnikov's letter, passed from hand to hand, written in pencil on a scrap of paper pulled from the dark. The instructor always pauses before reading the last line. "It's too dark to write. I'm writing blindly." For a moment, the classroom falls silent, a silence as heavy as the sea itself. That silence is the legacy of the Kursk. Not the wreck, not the politics, but the sound of 118 hearts that refused to surrender, even as the light faded. It's the silence that echoes every time a submarine dives beneath the waves, knowing that down there, far below, courage and tragedy sleep side by side. The Kursk has become more than a shipwreck. It's a story whispered through generations of sailors, a reminder that beneath the flags, beneath the orders and the machines, there are men. And that sometimes, the sea takes them not because they are weak, but because the world above was too slow to hear their cries. In the deep Arctic dark, she remains sealed in time, her steel bones resting cold against the ocean floor. The currents move gently across her hull, brushing away the rust, carrying her story onward through the water like a quiet confession. The world has moved on, but the Kursk has not. She still waits, not to rise, not to be found, but simply to be remembered. And in that frozen silence beneath the Barents Sea, the Kursk has become a monument that no human hand could ever build. There are no lights, no wreaths, no eternal flames, only darkness, pressure, and the faint hum of the deep. Yet down there, where sunlight dies and sound travels like memory, the submarine still stands upright, as if on watch. The ocean currents move around her like slow, solemn guards, carrying whispers of her name to the distant Arctic shelves. The sea has softened her edges but not her presence. The front half, the site of the explosion, is gone forever, twisted into unrecognizable wreckage. But the rear section remains hauntingly intact. The doors are sealed, the periscope still rises halfway, and in the command center, control panels are frozen in place, covered in silt like relics from another world. Some divers who have seen her say it feels like stepping into a cathedral, one made not of stone, but of steel and silence. For the families, the Kursk story never ended. Many refused to accept the official explanation. They gathered every year in Murmansk, holding portraits of their sons and husbands, demanding truth, not ceremony. Mothers stood shoulder to shoulder, holding candles against the Arctic wind, whispering names into the night. To them, the Kursk wasn't just a ship, it was the last heartbeat of a generation of sailors who had inherited both pride and pain. In 2015, 15 years after the tragedy, a diver placed a small plaque on the hull. It read only 3 words: "We remember you." The gesture was simple, but powerful. No politics, no flags, no speeches. Just memory, honest and human. Every new Russian submarine launched since then carries a ceremonial bell ring before its maiden dive, 12 chimes, one for each compartment of the Kursk. It's tradition now, passed quietly from captain to captain. They say it's not superstition, it's respect. Because every man who sails into the depths knows that the ocean is never empty, that it's filled with the ghosts of those who came before. For historians, the Kursk is studied as a disaster of mechanics and leadership. For sailors, it's a story of endurance, of men who kept calm, followed orders, and faced death with discipline. But for the sea, it's just another chapter. It has seen empires rise and vanish, fleets burn and rust, promises made and broken. To the ocean, all men are equal, brave, foolish, and fleeting. The Kursk never surfaced again, but she became eternal in another way. Her story crosses borders, reminding the world that arrogance and secrecy kill more than war ever could. Her steel coffin beneath the waves is not just a grave, it's a warning. And so, when storms roll across the Barents and waves crash against the shores of Murmansk, some say you can still hear a deep, distant echo, not engines, not explosions, but the steady pulse of memory. A heartbeat in the dark, reminding all who listen, they are still there. The sea took their voices, but it never took their story. Each year, as August draws near and the Arctic nights begin to lengthen, the people of Murmansk gather by the harbor where the wind smells of salt and rust. Wreaths are laid on the cold granite monument shaped like the bow of a submarine rising from the ground, the memorial to K-141 Kursk. The air is always the same, quiet, gray, heavy. Families stand shoulder to shoulder, clutching photographs that have faded around the edges. Some weep, some stare out toward the horizon where the Barents Sea begins. No one speaks loudly. The only sound is the slow tolling of a naval bell 12 times, one for each compartment, one for every place where hope died slowly in the dark. Sailors in dress uniforms salute, their breath visible in the cold. A priest reads a prayer for the dead, his words barely audible over the wind. And then silence returns, the deep, almost physical silence that the Arctic knows so well. Somewhere beyond the horizon, beneath 200 feet of black water, lies the wreck. Her hull is now covered with frost-like growths of sea life, but her shape remains unmistakable, the shadow of a machine that once symbolized power, now transformed into a ghost of warning. Oceanographers say the Kursk has become part of the seabed's landscape, her metal slowly fusing with stone and salt. Yet her story refuses to sink. New documentaries appear, books are written, and every few years, rumors resurface, a new theory, a new document, a claim of hidden evidence. But perhaps the truth is already known, not in the details of explosions or politics, but in the lesson the sea carved into history: pride is heavier than steel, and it always sinks the fastest. Inside Russia's submarine academies, new cadets still stand in line before diving for the first time, reciting an oath that now includes one more phrase: to remember those who did not return. On the wall above them, a portrait of the Kursk's emblem, a leaping white horse on a crimson shield, watches in silence. It has become more than a badge, it's a guardian. Some of the survivors' children have joined the Navy, carrying the names of their fathers stitched on their uniforms. They visit Murmansk each year and place small models of submarines into the sea, tiny paper vessels that drift for a few seconds before the waves pull them under. It's a ritual, a conversation with the past. And as night falls, when the Arctic light fades into endless gray, the Barents Sea looks almost peaceful. But those who know its story feel something else, a quiet presence in the depths, a reminder that beneath the calm surface lies tragedy, courage, and silence that no time can erase. The Kursk was meant to show strength, and in the end, it did, not through survival, but through the endurance of memory. Her sailors are still on watch, not in battle, but in the hearts of those who remember them. The ocean keeps them, the world recalls them, and the silence of the deep still carries their names. Because the sea never forgets. And so, beneath the endless gray of the Barents Sea, the Kursk remains silent, steadfast, eternal. Her steel hull lies cold against the seafloor, her flag sealed within, her crew forever on watch. Time has washed away the noise, the politics, the anger, but not the memory. The ocean has claimed her, but it has not erased her. It never will. Above, the waves still rise and fall, ships still pass through the same waters, and the wind still carries whispers of her name. For every sailor who dives into the deep, every family that stands by the memorial in Murmansk, and every nation that dares to challenge the sea, the Kursk is a reminder of what it means to be human, brave, fragile, and mortal. She was built to show power, but she became a lesson in humility. She was meant to patrol the oceans, but instead, she guards the truth that no machine, no leader, no nation can ever command the sea. The Barents Sea keeps her secret, wrapped in silence and pressure, her story echoing through the deep like a heartbeat that will never fade. And as the years pass, one truth endures, simple and eternal. The Kursk never surfaced, but she will never sink from memory.